In programming, developers use operators to perform operations on variables and values to manipulate individual data items and return a result. For example, you may already be familiar with the assignment operator to assign a value to a variable. In this video, you will learn about mathematical operators, compound assignments, and type conversions. First, let's start with the mathematical operators you can use to perform simple arithmetic. At this stage, you're probably familiar with the types integer and floating point, and that computers can perform two kinds of arithmetic based on these types. By default, these are the two fundamental data types that will be assigned automatically, int and double. Operators are used to perform calculations using these different data types, similar to how you would use math in your everyday life to solve common problems. For example, working out if you have enough change to get a muffin with your to-go coffee. So, to perform basic mathematical operations on data types, you can use the four operators: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. For example, suppose you create a variable named firstValue and assign it the value of 3 multiplied by 10, which is 30. Now the value of 30 will be stored in the firstValue variable. You can also perform calculations based on other variables. For example, suppose you create another variable named secondValue and assign it a value of 10. Now if you assign the variable firstValue to be secondValue multiplied by 12, firstValue will have a new value of 120. You can also modify a value based on itself. Suppose you create a variable named firstValue and assign it a value of 10. Next, you want to perform a calculation based on the value itself and then multiply that by 14. Don't worry if this sounds complicated now. Let's break it down. Essentially, what you are doing is saying firstValue equals firstValue times 14. So, it will take the value stored in the variable firstValue, which is 10, then it will multiply it by 14, and then store the result back in the variable firstValue. You can repeat this process using the same code excerpt this time, just adding the value of 1 to get 141. Next, let's move on to compound assignment operators, which is a shorthand way of performing some of the operations that you have learned about already. Compound operators work out the answer and store it in the variable. For example, instead of writing firstValue equals firstValue plus 2, you can just write firstValue plus equals 2. This also works for subtraction, multiplication, and division. In short, compound assignment operators allow you to write more efficient code. Okay, let's move on to mathematical operations with floating point numbers now. You will explore an example where two floating point numbers are added. Suppose that the firstValue variable is assigned an initial value of 3.3. Recall that this will be inferred by Swift as a double. Now, using the same modification sequence you learned earlier, let's assign firstValue to be the value of firstValue plus 1.5. This will now store the value of 4.8 in firstValue. Finally, you can have an example of a division where 20 is divided by 6, returning a result of 3.3 in the firstValue variable. Now that you can perform some basic mathematical operations on integers and floating point numbers, let's explore another operator that developers use frequently, the modulus operator. The modulus operator returns the remainder. You may recall learning this at school. For example, 10 divided by 3 was 3 remainder 1. Let's say, for example, you have a basket filled with 10 apples. If you share the apples evenly between two people, there will be no apples left. But if your basket has 11 apples, 1 apple would remain. If you take this example and create a variable called basket, you can say that basket is equal to 10 modulus 2. This will divide 10 into 2 and return a value of 0. This means that no apples remain. The basket is empty. Whereas if you divide 11 by 2, you will get a remainder of 1. Modulus is quite useful for checking if things fit exactly, because you will receive a 0 value if they do. Swift follows the rules of mathematics, and you may recall learning the acronym BIDMAS when you were younger. This represents the order of brackets, indices, division, multiplication, addition, and subtraction. Brackets have the highest priority, while subtraction has the lowest, and Swift follows those rules. Now let's explore working with positive and negative numbers. In Swift, you have something called the unary minus operator. This allows you to convert a number from positive to negative and vice versa. You do this by prefixing or placing the minus operator before a value. For example, if you have let 1 equals 1, you can say let negative value equal minus 1. Negative value will now have a value of minus 1. Finally, let's explore numeric type conversion in Swift. Recall that you learned that Swift is a strongly typed language, which means that Swift uses type inference to determine the initial type of all your variables and constants. So, what would happen if you tried to combine data types such as int and a float? For example, if x has a value of 5, y has a value of 0.33, and z is equal to x plus y, the operation will fail to compile and produce an error. This is because Swift infers x's value as an int and y's value as a double, and different types can't be added together. To solve this issue, the variable x needs to be converted to a double. You do this by passing the variable through an initializer, which will create a new version of the variable x, which can then be added to y. So you have let z equal double x plus y. However, if you have let x equal 5, let y equal 0.33, and let z double x plus y, x will now have a new value of 5.0. That happens because x is inferred as a double. It is very important to keep this rule in mind when you program in Swift. You now understand how operators, compound assignments, mathematical ordering, and numeric type conversions work together, bringing you one step closer to understanding the fundamentals of programming in Swift. Best of luck with the rest of your Swift programming journey.